everybody. Am I disturbing your breakfast? There was a time when, a couple of centuries ago, when the religious leadership dominated the world. And later, as the military machines on the planet grew, the military leadership dominated the world. In the last 100 years, democratically elected political leaderships have dominated the world. Particularly in the coming decade, it is going to be so that the business and the economic leadership is going to dominate the world. But the business has an albatross hanging around their neck that they're not concerned about anything else other than their personal ambitions and profit. When such a tremendous responsibility is coming towards business, it's important that the business leaders re-engineer themselves from personal ambition to a larger vision. If this doesn't happen, we will end up with a world in the next 20 years, a world without leadership, because when a community is offered leadership, if they don't take it, the trends of the world are such you cannot reverse it and put it in somebody else's hands. So time has come for the business to evolve into a leadership position. And this cannot be done if they're thinking from quarterly balance sheet to quarterly balance sheet. They need to have a larger sense of what the impact of what they're doing is. Today, over 70% of the world's activity is business. Human beings, 70% of their activity is actually engaged in some sort of business, whatever kind. When 70% of our time, energy and involvement is in business, I think unless we conduct it in a way that enhances our own life and everybody's life around us, the whole humanity will go to waste if we continue to do things which don't mean anything to us. In the name of business, people have separated business and life. I'm trying to bring it together wherever I go. It's the business of life. There is no business and life. Life is business, your business is life. I happened to be… the first time I went to the World Economic Forum, a few business people were very resentful. What is a mystic doing in an economic event? So I asked this person, he was an American person, and I asked, what do you do? He said, we manufacture computers. They were one of the leading computer manufacturing units, hardware manufacturers. Probably a year later they got bought over by the Chinese. So I said, see, whether you manufacture computers or cars or spacecraft or a safety pin, it doesn't matter what you manufacture. You might have forgotten, but there's only one business, the business of human well-being. All these things started only in the interest of human well-being. In the process of doing it, you might have forgotten, but that's the only business, human well-being, and that's my business too, that's why I'm here. And that's the only reason why we should be anywhere, because there is a business of human well-being. And as human beings, the leadership of the world is moving into the hands of the business at a very fantastic time, I would say, in the sense Never before in the history of humanity, any generation ever was capable of what we are capable of today. We have the necessary resource, capability and technology to address every human problem on this planet. Only thing that's missing is human beings who are inclusive enough to make a solution out of this. In our lives, if we do not do what we cannot do, that's not an issue. But if we do not do what we can do, we are a disastrous life. It's my endeavor to see that we don't become a vain, disastrous generation like that, everything at hand and we didn't do it. If it was not possible, that's different. Even 25 years ago, this was not a possibility. But today, if we wish, we can find solutions to everything on the planet in a very short span of time. The statistics say that if we spend $15 billion a year for the next 15 years, every child on this planet can be nourished and educated. We have never thought of these things in terms of raising a humanity. We are thinking of raising Indians, Americans and this and that, and we are still somewhere else. The technological breakthroughs has broken through all boundaries that we had set in the form of nation, race, religion, whatever else. But still, people who are in responsible positions, people who have leadership positions have not broken through in their own minds and consciousness, for which every creature on this planet, not just human beings, every one of them are paying a huge price. So this social venture business, whatever, it should not be an exclusivist group. It should be the mainstream. We should run businesses in such a way. I'm not talking about being philanthropic. I'm not for philanthropy, I'm not for charity. It's time we engineer our businesses with long-term vision. See, for example, I have kind of inspired a few major businesses in India to take to these things and they're doing a wonderful job. It's time such things happen everywhere. I was just telling this industry leaders, major industries have become like nations by themselves. They carry, 500,000 people working and their budgets are almost the size of a small nation. I said, see, in India, coconut farming in southern India is a very popular thing to do. A farmer, a poor farmer, if he plants a coconut tree, he waits for 10 years before he sees money out of it, because he knows if he takes care of it for 10 years, next 100 years, him and the next generation is taken care of. A simple, illiterate farmer does this. I said, why are you guys going around from one business school to another school, trying to take the cream out? You need to churn the bottom if you want a lot of cream. You're just trying to take the cream out. If somebody is just interested in the cream and not interested in the labor of churning what needs to be churned, that amounts to robbery as far as I'm concerned. No? Somebody wants to just take the cream, not interested in the labor of churning it up, it amounts to robbery. I said, this is what you're doing. You're going to the top schools and picking up the crop out there because you have the money to pick it up. 70% of rural India lives in a state where hardly there's any educational infrastructure, very rudimentary stuff. I said, why don't you take one area and invest in the education? In terms of money, it's really nothing. If you invest and for 15 years, you will have a crop of people who will be loyal to you, who will want to serve your company because you have educated them. And you will have good human resource, which is going to be the biggest challenge right now. Finding the right talent for what you're doing is the biggest problem. So a few industries went seriously into this and they're doing this education thing way bigger than us today because they have the money and the means and now they have the intention. Like this, many things need to happen. We should not think about investing in people as some kind of a philanthropic activity. This is an investment for the future. If you develop a very competent population across the world, your ability to run the business becomes effortless, you know. Right now the biggest problem is finding the right people and making them happen, and they are so limited, so you have to endure all kinds of nonsense from everybody around you. If the talent was all over the place, people would behave too, isn't it? Right now, if somebody has little talent, he must be little freaky too along with that. He can afford to be. No, there is a whole lot of humanity that's been untouched because what is the aspiration of a business? This must be understood. The aspiration of business is not profit, the aspiration of business is expansion. Expansion means whatever you're doing, whether you're manufacturing a safety pin or a computer or whatever, you want it to reach 7.2 billion people. It must become an inclusive process. If it becomes an inclusive process, an all-inclusive process, you don't have to worry about being socially conscious and this and that, anyway it'll benefit people. Instead of trying to be philanthropic, instead of trying to run our businesses with just a philanthropic, helpful attitude, it's time we run businesses more sensibly because the idea of business, the idea of ambition is to reach the ultimate possible potential. So instead of a narrow ambition, if we just shift it to a larger vision of what are we creating around us, the scope of the businesses can expand phenomenally and people will definitely benefit because today, the business or the economic activity on the planet is determining the nature of how people live. Only if this happens, that people have good life, only then I become relevant. You know, I'm setting up my platform. If all the businesses function well and people are well-to-do, that is when after the stomach is full, people see still life is not meaningful, that's when I become relevant. So I'm setting up the platform through you. Because if people have not eaten well and lived well, then you ask them to meditate, they're not going to do it. Their meditation will happen only in the stomach, nowhere else. So being socially conscious is fine, I'm not trying to get at the concept of that, but it should not be an exclusivist group. It is very important. Being globally relevant should be the goal of every business because unknowingly they're all aiming at it, but with a very narrow mindset. It's time that we consciously aim our businesses to be globally relevant. And for this to happen, one important thing is we have to raise beyond, you know, today you could fall in love with somebody in another country that you have never been to. Yes, through your Facebook, I'm saying. And it's a very wonderful love affair because you don't have to meet them at all, never get into trouble. Whole lot of people are going through life like this. So when national borders don't mean anything in terms of communication and businesses operate across the world, it's time to think globally. It is time to think whether what we're doing is relevant to we as a humanity and a planet that we are. If that relevance is not there, there are a million other things to do. I'm not trying to speak for one type of business and against another. Whatever the business that you're doing, it doesn't matter. Whether you're manufacturing that low energy consuming what? The car, if you can call it a car, it's a vehicle. It's a vehicle, because I saw the handle in India, we call this an auto rickshaw, Whether you're doing that or you're doing a high energy consuming car, it doesn't matter what you're doing. But if your thought evolves to a place whether what I'm doing is relevant or not relevant, will this expand to touch every life on the planet? I'm talking about a business plan, not philanthropic plan, as to how to expand and touch as many lives as possible, because that is the only way business can expand. And long-term relationships are the only way business becomes sustainable. Unless what you're doing is relevant for me for a long time, why would I have anything to do with you? So the good thing about a business person, juxtaposed with religious and military and other kinds of leaderships, is you can never get two religious people to agree upon anything, because if they agree, their business will collapse. Yes. Two military leaders cannot agree, because without boundaries, militaries will be meaningless. There's no boundary, there's no border to protect, militaries will become meaningless. Political leaders, well, you know, they're not been able to agree. They've been proving a point for the last month. But a business person is willing to make a deal with the devil if the deal is good. And that's a good sign that you're not deciding with whom to transact and whom not to transact. If the deal is good, you're willing to transact, that's a good sign, and this needs to happen, that you don't make a devil out of somebody. Right now we are busy making one set of people good and another set of people bad. It's time you do business with the bad. That's the only way you can transform the situation. If you exclude the bad will eat up the good. Because bad has more passion and energy always. Good likes to rest, you know. So, it is not about your goodness, it's not about your philanthropy, I'm just talking about doing business in a more sensible way. What we need is sense, not goodness. We don't need good people, we need sensible people on the planet who will do the right things, which will be a solution. With good intentions, if you do terrible things, what's the point? So, businesses have to evolve from personal ambition to a larger vision for the sake of their own well-being. Don't think of other people's well-being. Business person's business is to just run the business and expand the business and make sure his business is sustainable for the… You must think, will my business sustain itself for next 100 years? If you think of sustaining your business for next 100 years, there is no way you cannot think of the well-being of everybody else. Otherwise you cannot create something which will sustain. So, always, I've been somebody who's constantly been talking against corporate social responsibility, because you steal all the cream and then you give out a handout and you feel… wash your guilt with something. No, there is no necessity to have corporate social responsibility programs. The business itself must be socially responsible. Why make profit in all kinds of ways and then give out 2% and feel all right about it? That is just an eyewash for somebody else. I'm saying, if your life has to become meaningful, 70% of the activity that you perform, if it is meaningless, how will your life become meaningful? I cannot understand that. Only if everything that you do in your life is in sync with who you are and what you want in your life, if it is not in sync with that, how will life ever become meaningful for anybody? Continuing to do things which don't mean anything to us in our lives is a sure way of destroying ourselves. After some time, this activity will cease. If you continue business like this, it may so happen the next generation will not take to it. They don't see any meaning in taking on to an activity which doesn't mean anything to them. It is time that business is structured in such a way that it means a world to everybody, because it sustains and makes everybody's lives. Now, there are many ways to get to the top, but the question is, will you stay there? Can I tell you it? You're all getting very serious. Can I tell you a joke? Don't be so serious about your breakfast. One reason why human beings do all kinds of nasty things around themselves, to each other and to themselves and to everybody is because they're dead serious about their lives. It's a serious problem. On a certain day, a bull and a pheasant were grazing upon the field. The bull was grazing upon the grass and the pheasant picking ticks off the bull, partnership, There was a huge tree at the edge of the field. The pheasant very nostalgically looked up at the tree and said, "Oh, alas, there was a time when I could fly to the topmost branch of the tree. Now I do not have enough energy in my wing even to get to the first branch of the tree." The bull very nonchalantly said, "That's no issue. Eat a little bit of my dung every day, within a fortnight you will reach the topmost branch of the tree." The pheasant said, "Come on, what kind of rubbish is that?" The bull said, "Really, try and see, the whole humanity is on it." Very hesitantly, the pheasant started pecking at the dung, and lo, on the very first day it reached the first branch of the tree. Within a fortnight it did reach the topmost branch of the tree. Sitting on the topmost branch of the tree, just beginning to enjoy the scenery, an old farmer was rocking on his rocking chair, saw a fat old pheasant sitting on top of the tree, pulled out his shotgun and shot the bird off the tree. The moral of the story is, even bullshit may get you to the top, but it never lets you stay there. It's time we do something sensible. Because 70% of the world's activity is business, it's time we do something sensible, not just bull ourselves to some sense of well-being which will crash after some time.